I was really interested in using a collection as a starting point for artwork and looking at something in the local East Devon history. My main inspiration from the museum was the rock beer carpet, which was made in 1769. So it's a huge Axminster carpet that I was really fascinated by because it is 240 years old and it hadn't moved from the manner it was made for until it came to the museum. And I loved the patterns and how you could see the signs of age and deterioration on it and kind of the lives of the people who'd lived with that carpet. The work I created for this project were twofold. I made a series of monoprints and screen prints that are based on the carpet and the patterns, and I wanted them to replicate the deterioration of the carpet. So they're layers and layers of monoprinting and screen print that bring out, that I hope the viewer will make them look more intricately at the patterns of the carpet and think about the qualities of textiles. And then I also made an animation, which is just, the idea was simply to bring alive the patterns of the carpet.
I was really inspired by being up in the museum stores and being allowed to kind of rummage through the objects in the stores, looking through boxes, handling objects. It's a very different experience to looking at objects in glass cases in the museum itself. And I was really interested in the kind of undercurrents present in those objects. So feeling the significance of those things, thinking about people who had owned them, and kind of the memories and stories connected to them. And it was just really interesting to see how the objects in the museum made me think differently about my work and how my work made people view the objects in the museum differently, so to see those crossovers between my practice and the museum collection. I also involved the community in the exhibition by inviting families in for art activities and sculpture activities within the museum, and also we've had local school groups come and take part in activities here with me. It's quite a kind of non-rational, non-linear kind of piece of work, and I guess it's going to hopefully make people think in a slightly different way about objects in the museum, and I guess that's kind of the role of an artist, to sort of to tease out different kind of feelings and thoughts from people. If people take something away from it like that, even if they feel like it remains quite mysterious and ambiguous, I'm happy with that.
First time I went into museum, the museum itself was amazing. So that's how I got involved. I wanted to do something with this museum. Because I was particularly interested in all the hooks coming out of the ceiling in the kitchen. So I thought about 21 hooks from the ceiling. So I thought, oh, I could make something I can hang. So I involved local community college to use porcelain paper clay. I have never used it. So I used them as a kind of like my apprentice. So they came up with lots of ideas. Then I got the inspiration from that. Then I made tableware sphere and then all other hangings too. People will see weird objects hanging. It's very, so they can transfer their nowness into weirdness of Alice in Wonderland. That's what I aimed for.
I just thought the fact that I would be allowed access to artefacts that perhaps aren't on display and sort of behind the scenes, get my hands on things that I wouldn't normally have any access to. I thought that would be really interesting. And also to have the freedom to explore things and add a bit more technology, play with things a bit more, I suppose. I was really inspired by the collection of documents that the museum hold. These documents go back hundreds of years, but they are held at the Heritage Centre in Taunton, and they contain stories, as I said, going back hundreds of years. So I thought it would be nice to bring them back to Axbridge and show people some of the things that are owned by the town. So I've made 2 paper cuts which illustrate the stories from the ancient manuscripts. They're made using a scalpel, cutting out designs onto locally made Somerset paper. Both of the artworks have a QR code in the centre. If you scan the QR code, it will take you to a recording of the original stories from the manuscripts.
Well, when I first visited the museum and the collections, I was really struck by the story of the lace machine and the lace riots that took place in Chard Town and the vast number of different textiles industries. So that was my link really with the collection. So I started researching more about the different materials and discovered that the net fabric was still being produced in the town to today. And I was particularly wanting to get a female perspective on the collections. And so as you come in, you'll see like a wall of smock arms, which for me depict all the hundreds of women who worked in the factories. So, and certainly the almost their work attire was this kind of smocking. And so for me, that's why I wanted to create these hundreds of arms, that they are visible behind a facade of a building, but you might not know that they are there, and they have been working in these industries and almost become this machine themselves. And you also see a series of what I call harvest figures, these harvest ladies whose bodies are constructed from cogs and the machinery which related to, there's so much machinery in the Child Museum, it was everywhere.
Well, the first time I walked into the Wells and Mendip Museum, the aspect of the collections which I knew was going to excite me didn't disappoint. The museum has an extraordinary and internationally important collection of animal bone, prehistoric animal bone, that has been excavated from the Mendip caves. Now, I find ancient bone fascinating, not only in terms of how it looks and the surface textures that are an inherent part of it, but it also has this capacity to tell us extraordinary stories about the formation of our world and of our society, and a lot of them in quite unexpected ways. So I really, really wanted to investigate that, and that really is what I ended up doing. And I think the narratives that I've kind of sort of condensed into these flipbook boxes in a very kinetic way, because the flipbook boxes don't work unless you turn the handle. So you have to become proactive within the process. And it's almost like a sort of a metaphor for winding up your imagination, which you can then bring to bear on the bones. A lot of the bones actually feature in the artwork in the boxes, so you're literally making them come to life by turning the handle. And I think that brings a spark of life to what's in the case, which wouldn't otherwise be there.
I work mainly in metal on a range of scales, using lots of different techniques. For the project, I've created an installation made from steel. The collection at the museum has got some fantastic drawings from the Morgan Giles boatyard, and I responded to those by doing linear outlines of those in metal. And I also looked at archive material, maps and the job book and different documents that were in the archive. I also got volunteers to write about different jobs and family members, and I enamelled those on different elements that are part of the piece. Hopefully the piece will allow people to view documents that they can't see that are in the archive. Also, it will allow them to see objects that are available in the museum, the boat drawings, but allow them to see more of them and different views, and get them interested to go and search through the drawers so they'll find these drawings.
I love museums. I've always loved museums. I love finding out about the history of places. So when I saw the project advertised, it immediately appealed to me. In recent years, my printmaking work has been very inspired by Dartmoor. So when I saw that one of the museums listed was the Museum of Dartmoor Life, I was immediately interested in working with that museum and finding out more about the history of Dartmoor. So when I visited the museum, one of the things that struck me immediately was how many tools were in the museum. And I really got a sense of how hard it was for people to make a living on Dartmoor over the eons, the hundreds and hundreds of years that we've actually had human beings living on Dartmoor. I decided to make a kind of timeline of prints going back to when Dartmoor was just a lava flow during the volcanic sort of creation of the earth, right through to the present day. So I made 5 prints showing how the different industries and activities and lifestyles have changed the landscape. I wanted the public coming in to have a reason to take a closer look at the collection. So I created this object trail. So I asked the volunteer team, who have fantastic knowledge of the collection and of the history of the place, to select 20 objects which, in their opinion, had been key in changing the landscape of Dartmoor. And also I wanted to reference something that was changing Dartmoor now. So I asked one of the National Park rangers that question, and they told me actually it's recreational use, it's us walking on the moor, which is one of the things that's really changing the moor now. So I did some monoprinting workshops using walking boots, and we made different sort of prints using 3 different methods using walking boots, and had a lot of fun.